Dotiv, Integrative and Preventive Healthcare. The content discussed in this episode is for informative purposes only
and should not be replaced by individualized professional consultations or professional medical advice.
Hey guys, I'm Tasha.
Hey listeners, this is Goonie, and we're here to discuss lifestyle medicine. I'm that person who's going to be picking the overpriced kombucha over mimosa or one of these lattes, those fancy lattes. And let's be honest, even though I pick it, I know it's not tasty.
Listen, I am guilty as charged when it comes to overpriced hipster kombucha. In my old CrossFit gym, they used to sell them. And I'm like, yeah, I want to be in alignment with the branding of this place. So let me buy the kombucha that costs $16. And I'm just like, oh, this is so acidic. I don't know how I'm going to finish this, but I already paid for it. So
might as well
finish, guzzle it down.
But it's kind of commonly known for gut flora.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. I know it's meant to be good, but obviously when it's acidic, I'm just like, oh, I remember the feeling of taking apple cider vinegar. I'm like, oh, this must be good for you because it doesn't taste that great. So it must be great for your body.
But I think that we need to bust this myth, if it is a myth.
Yeah, I definitely want to get to the root of this buzz drink and I guess understand fermented foods as a whole. How is it good for us? It really ties in with the person we want to speak to today, which is Elle Fox. She is a naturopath, an author, a researcher with a background in medicine, and also a lecturer with 30 years of experience treating people with gastrointestinal and behavioral challenges. She's also very passionate about locally grown food and regenerative farming. So welcome to Dotiv The Podcast, Elle. We are excited to dive into this conversation today.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So welcome, Elle. So I'm wondering, enlighten us. What are fermented foods?
Well, fermented foods and drinks are as old as the hills, who have been subjected to what I would call a controlled microbial breakdown. So basically, food has been encouraged to grow specific kinds of bacteria and yeast. They've been in the human diet forever. And also, if you look at traditional cultures, places like Korea, for example, where kimchi is a national dish. Noni is a fruit, a Hawaiian fruit, which is fermented as a herbal. Beetroot kvass is a Ukrainian dish. And if we go back in time, the Central Russian steppe people survived and thrived on a diet of what is called kumis, which is fermented mare's milk. And it is described as champagne mixed with sour cream.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I like it.
Well,
it sounds weird.
It is an acquired taste. Fermented foods are an acquired taste, but I will give you some fermented foods that we all eat and drink. So sour cream is fermented. Yogurt is fermented. Sourdough bread is a product of fermentation. Wine, beer, mead, yes, sauerkraut and kimchi, which have become buzzwords.
Are they all healthy though?
Define healthy.
See, this is why we're having this conversation, and because we've come to a point where we conclude that kombuchas and these kimchis, etc., are healthy foods.
Too much of a good thing is not a good thing. I had a friend who got a jar of kimchi and she sat and ate half a kilogram of kimchi in one go because she loves it so much.
Yeah, probably do it if I had rice with it.
Yeah,
I love kimchi.
Okay, sorry. So we interrupted you. What was the risk here of your friend having this half a kilogram of kimchi?
She had a few trips to the loo. There was no long-term problem.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Okay, so it was just a case of a bit like having too much of anything, to be honest. If you have too much alcohol, you will either vomit or you will have diarrhea or a combination of.
I know you said there's no good or bad, but then there are foods that we eat like, sourdough bread, and then also in wine and beer. So these foods, they're known to not be great for you. There are studies that say, too much alcohol is not good for you, right? And so, because the process is the same, so how do we differentiate that it's something we should take or not? And whether it's good for you?
It's not the same process because commercial wines are nothing like what we would call a natural wine. A natural wine still contains the microbial cultures, so it can be cloudy, for example, and it very likely does not contain sulfites and preservatives and all sorts of other things which are detrimental to our gut. There's a difference between having a glass of natural wine to increase your variety of drinks and getting entirely drunk on anything.
Basically saying, yeah, go on, have your drink, as long as you do it in moderation.
I have taken quite a few people off alcohol, people who were addicted to alcohol.
I mean, yeah, again, so you're on another spectrum of your relationship with that.
Yes. How do you take somebody off an addiction like that, which can be extremely detrimental to their health?
Right.
First of all, you don't say, right, you're going dry. Some people can do that. Please don't get me wrong. But the majority of people cannot withdraw from an addiction that has been going on for a while. So what I suggest, first of all, to those people is find the best quality wine you can buy, ideally biodynamic, because that is the best possible quality that you can find, and then have a glass and enjoy every minute of it. Because as far as I'm concerned, addiction is 1/10, and the 9/10 are the guilt that we heap on top of it.
So being present as you drink and just enjoy that drink, and
the guilt of it, the mindset around it as well, that affects how you process it, right? Yeah. Coming back to the benefits of fermented foods, can you shed some light to why is it so popularized now and become mainstream that we have to have more probiotics, more fermented foods in our diet?
Okay, well, fermentation is a process of preserving food so that it doesn't spoil without refrigeration. So if you look at traditional cultures, unless you lived somewhere up in the Arctic, you didn't have ice or low enough temperatures to preserve food. So cheese is the result of fermentation.
Right.
So it's a preservation method by encouraging certain groups of bacteria and yeasts to proliferate. And as a result, they do not allow pathogenic or what we would call bad bacteria. So for example, E. coli, which we have come to fear, it exists in a healthy gut. It's the number of E. coli which can become pathogenic, which is why I try to avoid saying good, bad. It's pathogenic or beneficial. There is also increasing research that fermented foods have a variety of benefits, including increasing the amount of the nutrients that we can take from the food, and increasing the nutrition and content of food. So if you ferment cabbage into sauerkraut, you increase the amount of vitamin C by 10 times. And because of refrigeration and certain other modern preservation methods, which include preservatives, chemicals, we have become sanitized. Our gut bacteria have reduced in numbers. Now we have got trillions and trillions of microorganisms in our gut. And there is research to show that on top of the fact that we've got trillions of microorganisms in our gut, and they contain yeasts, viruses, all sorts of things, lactobacilli and bifidobacteria, certain bacterial strains that come from fermentation, have a beneficial result if they're given to babies with eczema. Some of this research has been done with the strains of bacteria themselves, not fermented foods necessarily.
Right. So I'm wondering, are fermented foods suitable for children? Is it maybe too aggressive for their gut lining? Basically, can their stomach take it?
Well, fermented foods are not aggressive to the gut lining. What fermented foods do is they increase our ability to digest food and take nutrients. There is a term in medicine called bioavailability. So that is the ability of our body. It's not what we eat, is what we absorb from the food we eat. And there is a whole load of reasons why we would absorb less of something or more of something else. And if we agree that we start from the same baseline, which is good, locally produced, freshly prepared food, then how we absorb that food is entirely dependent on how healthy our gut is. And after so many years of antibiotics and other medical interventions, we have got compromised guts. I mean, if you just look at the hygiene hypothesis that says that, we're too sanitized and we haven't got enough bacteria around us and in us, and that's why we have allergies. And then you see that children who suffer with allergies and food intolerances and things like that actually need fermented foods. The caveat I would put here is that if children have not been exposed to fermented foods, They need to be introduced very slowly because otherwise they will throw a reaction, like with anything.
So a short answer, fermented foods are suitable for children.
Yeah.
Do you have any examples with your clients of kind of the effects and benefits of it?
Yes, I do. My whole practice is revolving around supporting people's gastrointestinal problems and the associated behavioral issues. And that is from babies all the way to older people, because we all eat. We all need to eat, and we all need to have a functional gut to be able to eat and absorb our food properly. And our moods are very much affected. I mean, recently there have been papers that say that chronic fatigue is not a mental issue, it is a gastrointestinal issue.
You said behavioral issues. Could you clarify?
So, for example, we see some children that appear to be shy, particularly if children have got significant spectrum issues.
Autism or being on the spectrum,
Yeah, we say that they do not engage socially. One of the issues that you see in behaviors like that is that they will hide. They will look at you out of the corner of their eye rather than face on. And that is considered a mental and emotional challenge, that those children cannot socialize enough. But there's been research that shows if you supplement children like that with vitamin A, they will, I think it's a very, very high percentage, almost like 50%, the behavior will diminish and the children will be able to engage face on. Now, one of the issues we have with vitamin A is a substance which helps the integrity and health of the eye tissue. It's paramount. So you have things like carotenoids, carrots, traditionally we talk about carrots, eat carrots because they help your vision.
I heard that.
So we've got substances in carrots, what we call provitamin A. So we supplement with vitamin A and the child's behavior changes. Now we have made a nutritional intervention that changes the behavior. What has been found is that a lot of those children, their eye tissue is not healthy enough, and you supplement with a substance which supports the eye tissue, then the eye tissue starts functioning better. So the behavior changes.
Interesting.
And that's just one example.
Can you find vitamin A in fermented food?
Yes. Fermented cod liver oil, for example, is a fish oils are very high in vitamin A, D. Sourdough bread would probably be high in vitamin E because wheat germ is very high in vitamin E. I'll give you another example. You've got people that are have to be gluten free. So I'm sensitive to gluten and dairy, but I'm happy drinking raw milk that has not been pasteurized, and I'm very happily eat sourdough bread because the microorganisms that are in the sourdough starter, digest a lot of the gluten in the dough. So there is very little gluten left at the end of the process. A traditional bread would take between 24 and 48 hours from the moment you start needing to eating it. Do you know how long it takes for supermarket bread from the moment it's milled to the hitting the shelf?
Tell us.
2.5 hours.
Yeah.
So there's no time. It's called Chorleywood method. It's a method that was actually invented by the British in Chorleywood, hence the name, and was exported to the rest of the world. And it's a specific strains of bacteria that very quickly make the bread rise. It's a particular type of yeast, combination bacteria and yeasts. So there is no time for the proper traditional microorganisms to help the gluten be eaten by them. That takes that longer period.
So how do you know the quality of your yeast is actually the good kind of quality? Because now there's a lot of manufactured yeast, right?
So you can actually make your own sourdough starter at home with flour and water. That's all you need. What happens is, remember when we said at the beginning that a fermentation is a controlled process. So what we do is we want to encourage the bacteria and yeasts we want into the ferment and not the pathogenic ones. So when you mix flour and water and you leave it on the counter at the side of your kitchen, the idea is that you encourage the natural microorganisms that are in the environment to come in and set up home in your sourdough starter. And that's what happens. in a clean environment, when I say clean, I mean, a home that hasn't got molds and is aired properly and is not near a main road. And if you've got a reasonably healthy home environment, you will develop a healthy sourdough starter. And then you can use that to make bread.
I never really realized that actually, as you're getting your bread to ferment or get those yeast up, that you're also inviting the chemicals in the air to be hosted there.
Everything that comes from the floor of the woods, which is forever in fermentations. Mushrooms are a result of fermentation, and they produce fermentation themselves. And there is a particular bacterium found in nature called Mycobacterium vacca, which produces positive feelings, which is researchers have found that if you take a 20-minute walk in nature, because you breathe these bacteria in, they produce a positive feeling in you. So what we are seeing is that the microbial world affects our moods, so it will affect our behavior.
Oh, wow, that's
and there is
amazing.
enough evidence to show that this is true.
Mm-hmm.
Earlier, you were saying that there's a term you use, I can't remember it right now, bio something, basically
Bioavailability.
Bioavailability. So are you saying that with fermented foods, you're creating a better and more healthy gut bacteria in your body? And so does that mean that when that is happening, whatever nutrients from foods that you eat is absorbed better and you're able to digest and actually get the most out of it?
Absolutely. I will give you a slightly funny example. My husband used to work up in Canary Wharf, and at lunchtime, occasionally, if he didn't pack a lunch from home, because he likes falafels, there was a little pop-up that made falafels, so he would have falafels. I always knew when he had falafels because he became rather windy.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. If he has my falafels, he's never windy, but my falafels are made with chickpea flour, which has been fermented. Well, chickpeas have been fermented, and then the flour is made from the chickpeas, which have been fermented. So they have been almost pre-digested for him, so they have been made more available, because gas in the intestines means that the food is sitting there fermenting because the intestine is not able to take our gut is designed to take as much nutrition out of the food we eat as possible.
And it's true that you see the difference of windiness. You're taking the chickpeas from the can, or when you let them sit into water for a day or two. So it's it really changes a lot of how you process your food before cooking it, even before eating it. It's
absolutely
everything. It's everything in the detail, right?
Mm-hmm. And I tell you, I'm not suggesting this to people who are just starting now with fermentation. I ferment my chickpeas for a week in milk kefir.
Oh, wow. Okay.
As I said, I do not suggest anyone does this unless they know what they're doing.
Okay.
Right.
But a day or two if you take chickpeas from dry and you put them in a big bowl of purified water, you can use another ferment like kombucha or kefir, whether it's milk or water,
right,
or apple cider vinegar, and you add that to the water and you let them sit in that water for 1 or 2 days, and then you cook them.
To circle back to our initial conversation about this overpriced kombuchas and fancy brunch at hipster cafes, how can we make our own kombucha at home?
You need what is called a Scoby. Now, Scoby is an acronym. So it's the first letter of these words, which are symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeasts. So symbiotic means living in harmony. So a kombucha Scoby looks like a pancake, a bit of a pancake. It's like a jellified pancake. Or you might have heard of it as a kombucha mushroom. You can buy them or you can be gifted them because they grow like topsy. If I should have brought my Scoby hotel to show you how many Scobies I have. So if you find somebody to gift you a healthy Scoby, then you can literally feed it tea, sweet black tea. So that's your basic kombucha.
By sweet, what do you mean?
Bacteria and yeasts that we use for fermentation need to eat. So their food is usually sugars. And we've got two different types of fermentation, and what we call aerobic fermentation. So it's open to the air, like we were talking about sourdough, flour and water open to the elements kind of thing. I mean, yes, you put like a muslin on top to stop dust and insects, but it is effectively, it's not sealed away from the environment.
Right.
Okay. So that's what we call aerobic fermentation. And that is what produces vinegar. Now, if you have what we call anaerobic fermentation, which means without air, what you do is you produce a sealed environment for a ferment. So this is how you make kimchi and sauerkraut. So you need the sugar because that's how you feed the Scoby.
Yep.
So if you make the tea, the tannins in the tea and the sugar are eaten by the bacteria and the yeasts, and it produces this slightly alcoholic beverage. And when I say alcoholic, I mean we talk about 0.04%. Okay. So you make kombucha by making a nice pot of tea,
right,
and then plopping in the cold sweet tea a Scoby and leaving it to ferment for a few days.
Okay, a few days. Are we talking 3 days? Are we talking a week?
Depends on the size of the Scoby and whether it's your first fermentation or more than that. So initially, if you have a new Scoby and you put it in tea, it will take more days to kickstart the fermentation. The other thing that you have to take into consideration is the time of year. So spring and summer, because obviously of the time of year, but bacteria and yeasts are they're able to be more active. So you get a shorter fermentation time.
Right. But does the solution continues fermenting once you're kind of done?
Yes,
in the
it
process.
will continue to ferment. It will become very acidic and very vinegary.
So there's like a best before type of thing, right?
Well, it's not, no, it's just different. What happens is, obviously, depending on the solution, the amount of sugar in the drink, you can have a sweeter kombucha, which is a bit higher in sugar because the bacteria and the yeasts have not eaten all of it. Or you can have a more acidic, a sharper kombucha. Some people prefer the sharper taste. Some people prefer the sweeter taste. And what you can do is afterwards, when you've got it to where you want it as far as your tastes are concerned, you can take this kombucha and you can flavor it with berries or citrus. So you do what we call a second fermentation that does not involve the Scoby. The Scoby cannot have anything else in the solution except the sugar and the water, the tea.
Right, got you.
Okay.
That does require a full-on course to actually know how to do your own kombucha, but that sparked enough interest for me to actually start looking into this.
It's not a cheap hobby.
It's a good one. That's a good thing to mention. Like, how much are we talking about?
Well, it depends. If you want to make normal kombucha, what I would suggest is that you have the best quality tea you can buy. So organic tea, pure water, because they really don't like chlorine. And chlorine is not the only thing that's in our tap water, but we won't go into that. So you need to have a filter that takes out chlorine and heavy metals and all sorts of other things. And then you need organic sugar.
Right.
Okay. So in some ways, but then you are in full control of what you're going to be drinking at the end of it.
Exactly. It goes back to one of our conversation about, being conscious in what you eat and having like full understanding of what you're going to be putting in your system.
The other thing that's important to keep in mind is the load of microbes in your environment already. So people who have got black mold or damp find it very hard to produce a healthy ferment.
I was going to say, like, when you're talking about like, it's not a cheap hobby to have, because first of all, you need to, as you said, filtered water, then your sugar, the organic tea, and then you need to control your environment. You need to have space, I guess, as well. You need to have those jars. And so all of this kind of make you think twice before you actually go and do your own. But I think that because it's so empowering to be able to do your own, because like you have a control over, you have an understanding of what you're putting in your system, and you have like, okay, so if this is not good for drinking, you can use it for something else. So it's like it's a multi-purpose function. So again, you're just empowering your day-to-day nutrition skills.
Yeah, and the Scobies, because they will grow. So what you can do with the Scobies is you can take the old Scobies out and you can dehydrate them and turn them into jelly bits of, you can cut them up and they can become probiotic jellies for children or adults. Or if you have chickens, you give them to your chickens. Have you ever seen a chicken going after a Scoby?
But you're giving us so many multiple application of, and that's the beauty of it, of fermented food, and how you can actually, it's endless.
But I think that is actually a good way for us to close off as well, because then people now can go and do their own research and figure out what they want to venture into, right? So before we close off, we always have our rapid fire questions. So I'll go with the first question to get to know you better. What is the first sign that you are out of balance?
The first sign that you're out of balance is, I'm not often out of balance these days.
Lucky you.
I tend to feel tired. That's my first sign of, I haven't had enough water. Water is a big one.
One of those coping mechanism is water. Do you have another kind of magical trick to fight fatigue?
I use, there are remedies, there are flour remedies that I use. There is one called Dynamis, if I really need to power through something. It's a flour remedy, a bit like, Rescue Remedy, if you like. It's not made by that company. There's one particular remedy that I use, which is called Dynamis. Or I will get up, I will stop. Normally what I do is I put my timer on for 1 hour increments. And when the timer goes, I will get up. If I'm plowing through research or something like that, I will get up, have a glass of water, have a walk in the garden, some sunshine. And the other thing is walking barefoot on the grass, for me, does it.
Nice.
So I don't resort to coffee or, I love a cup of coffee. Please don't get me wrong. But I don't use them as crutches for my lack of energy. I don't often have ups and downs. Well, that's because I eat well, I sleep well. I'm very careful with my personal hygiene, if you like. And when I say hygiene, I mean, I'm not talking about cleanliness only. I'm talking about
energy and
your lifestyle.
My lifestyle. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good way for people to take away some tools to practice for themselves. And the final question is, what is one book that has impacted your approach to well-being or wellness?
So I was given the Sandor Katz's book called Wild Fermentation as a Christmas present by my husband, and I joked, I said, other girls get diamonds and I get a book. But then I got the diamonds as well. But then I met Sandor and had training sessions with him, and I fell in love with the guy. He's amazing. And he is a living, breathing example of how wonderful fermentation can be and how it can support people, because he is an AIDS survivor, and he firmly believes that fermented foods are what have kept him alive all these years. It's a book that I would recommend everyone buys if they want to get into fermentation.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Elle, for being on the show. We truly believe that by empowering and triggering this thought process to our audience about, rethinking the way they eat, the way they process their food, the way they even want to take ownership of it, right? So thank you for that.
Thank you for inviting me. I had an absolute ball, and I'm fizzing. You see, fermentation is bubbles.
See? Awesome.
Yeah, love it.
Thank you, ladies. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Elle. If you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and select that follow or subscribe button. For now, stay safe and we'll see you next week.